The moment I walked into my parents' house that evening, I knew something was off. The air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. My mother, Vivian, was bustling around the kitchen with a little too much energy, her laughter sharp and practiced. My sister, Brooke, sat at the table in a silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, absently scrolling on her phone, her diamond engagement ring flashing under the chandelier. The clinking of dishes, the smell of roasted chicken, the faint hum of jazz in the background, it all felt like a setup for something I hadn't been told about. Then I saw her. My grandmother, Eleanor, seated at the head of the table, perfectly composed in her favorite navy dress. Her silver hair glowed under the light, and her piercing eyes followed every movement in the room. I hadn't seen her in months, not since she'd moved to the quiet lake house 2 towns over. "Claire," she said with that gentle, unreadable smile of hers, "I'm so glad you could make it." I kissed her cheek and tried to ignore how my mother's eyes narrowed. "Of course, Grandma. Wouldn't miss dinner with you." But the truth was, I hadn't been invited until this morning, when Grandma herself called me. "It's important," she'd said. "Be there tonight." Dinner started like every family gathering, pleasant on the surface, tense underneath. My parents asked about work in that polite, detached way that made it clear they didn't really care. Brooke dominated the conversation, gushing about her upcoming wedding to Ethan, their honeymoon plans, the designer who was making her dress. My mother looked at her like she was royalty. "You deserve it, darling," she kept saying, topping off her wine glass with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I focused on my plate, trying to disappear. Then, halfway through dessert, Grandma set down her fork and looked at me. "Claire," she said softly, "how do you like the house?" I blinked, confused. "The house?" She smiled faintly. "Yes, the one I bought for you." The room froze. Brooke's fork clattered against her plate. My mother's face drained of color, and my father actually stopped breathing for a moment. My pulse raced as every eye turned toward me. I don't understand," I stammered. Grandma just kept smiling, calm and deliberate. "Oh, I think you do," she said. I had no idea that one simple question, "How do you like the house?" would set off a chain of confessions that would tear my family apart. For a few seconds, the only sound in the room was the faint tick of the clock on the wall. My mother's hand tightened around her wine glass until I thought it might break. "Mother," she said slowly, her voice measured but trembling at the edges, "what house are you talking about?" Grandma dabbed her mouth with her napkin like we were discussing the weather. "The one on Maple Lane," she said lightly. "I bought it for Claire a few weeks ago. I wanted her to have a place of her own." I froze, my mind scrambling to catch up. Maple Lane? That quiet little street near the lake? The one with the white fence and ivy-covered porches? My mother's smile faltered, her tone slipping into something sharp. "You mean you bought Claire a house? Without telling us?" Grandma looked at her calmly. "I didn't realize I needed your permission." My father cleared his throat, trying to recover. "Eleanor, that's quite generous, but a purchase like that seems excessive. Claire's doing fine on her own." "Is she?" Grandma asked, tilting her head. "Last time I checked, she's been juggling 2 jobs and still renting that apartment with the broken radiator." My face burned. "Grandma, you didn't have to, I wanted to," she interrupted gently. "You've always been the one who never asked for anything." Brooke's voice cut through the silence, sharp and brittle. "So you just decided to hand her a house? Just like that?" Grandma turned her gaze toward her. "You already have one, dear. Your parents gave you theirs as a wedding gift." Brooke blinked, her jaw tightening. That's different, she said quickly. That's family tradition. Exactly, Grandma said, her tone so soft it was almost kind. And this is mine. My mother's composure cracked. You can't just go around buying property for one grandchild and not the other, she snapped. That's not fair. Grandma's eyes darkened slightly, and for the first time that evening, I saw something steely behind her polite smile. Fair? She echoed. Vivian, do you want to have that conversation in front of everyone? My mother went silent. The tension in the room thickened until it felt hard to breathe. I could feel Brooke's glare burning into me, her jealousy radiating like heat. My father finally exhaled, rubbing his temples. Eleanor, please, he said. Let's not make this dramatic. I'm not making it dramatic, Grandma replied. I'm making it clear. She folded her napkin neatly, placed it on the table, and met my eyes again. Claire, I'll take you to see it tomorrow. The keys are already yours. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely hear her. I didn't know whether to thank her or to apologize for the storm she had just unleashed. But before I could speak, Brooke's chair scraped violently against the floor as she stood up. Unbelievable, she hissed. You've always had a soft spot for her. I should have known. She stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots down the hallway. My mother followed, muttering something about having a word later. Grandma didn't even look after them. She just reached for her tea, perfectly calm. Let them cool off, she said. We'll talk in the morning. I thought she meant talk about the house, but what Grandma revealed the next day made it clear that the gift wasn't about generosity at all. It was about justice. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the look on my mother's face, the mix of fury and disbelief, like she'd just watched years of control slip through her fingers. By morning, the house was eerily quiet. My parents' bedroom door was shut, Brooke's car was gone, and the smell of coffee drifted faintly from the kitchen. Grandma Eleanor was already dressed, sitting at the table with a small folder neatly placed beside her cup. She looked up as I walked in. Morning, sweetheart, she said gently, as if nothing monumental had happened the night before. I sat across from her, still trying to make sense of it all. Grandma, I don't understand why you did this. A house? That's a lot. She smiled softly, her eyes unreadable. I know it is. And that's exactly the point. She slid the folder across the table. Inside were photographs, papers, even receipts. I've been watching for a while, Claire, she said. Your parents, Brooke, they think I don't notice things. But I do. I see who asks, and I see who gives. I frowned, flipping through the documents. There were bank statements, transfer slips, notes about the house Brooke now lived in. I don't understand, I murmured. Why are you showing me this? Grandma leaned back, her voice calm but laced with quiet anger. Because I know your parents used your name to co-sign Brooke's mortgage 3 years ago, without your knowledge. My breath caught. What? They used your credit, she continued, her tone steady. They said you agreed to it, told the bank you were aware. But you never signed anything. I found out when I started reviewing some family accounts last month. My chest tightened as the weight of her words sank in. They committed fraud? Grandma nodded slowly. They did. And when I confronted your mother, she said it was a temporary arrangement, that you'd be fine with it since Brooke needed help. I stared down at the folder, my pulse pounding. That's why you bought me the house, I whispered. To make it right. No, Grandma said quietly. I bought it because I wanted you to have something that no one could take from you. Something that's yours, truly yours. My throat closed up. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The realization hit harder than I expected, not just the betrayal, but the love behind Grandma's calm defiance. You shouldn't have to fix their mess, I said finally. She smiled faintly. Oh, my dear, I'm not fixing their mess. I'm exposing it. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? She sipped her coffee, her tone almost casual. Let's just say I've made sure everyone who should know, knows. Including the bank. My stomach twisted. Grandma, what did you do? She gave me that same cryptic smile she always used when she'd already made up her mind. You'll find out soon enough. I didn't realize it then, but by the end of that week, my grandmother's quiet revenge would explode into a scandal that no one in my family would ever forget. By the end of that week, my family name was everywhere, at least everywhere that mattered in our small town. It started with a single phone call. My mother rang me just after lunch, her voice frantic, trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. What did you tell her? She demanded before I could even say hello. What did you say to my mother? I blinked, confused. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Claire. She snapped. The bank froze our accounts this morning. They're auditing everything, your father's business, Brooke's mortgage, even the trust fund. I sat there in stunned silence as she ranted. She went to them, my mother hissed. Eleanor told them we falsified signatures. Do you know what this means? Do you have any idea what you've done? Her voice cracked, slipping from anger into panic. She's ruining us. I opened my mouth to speak, but she'd already hung up. I lowered the phone slowly, my pulse hammering in my throat. Grandma hadn't just confronted them, she'd exposed everything. When I called her that afternoon, she sounded completely calm. Ah, I see Vivian finally found out, she said, almost amused. Grandma, I whispered, you told the bank? Of course, she said simply. I sent them copies of everything. Fraud doesn't just vanish because it's family. They're furious, I said. They're saying you're destroying them. She sighed softly. No, darling. I'm saving you. The rest? They're just facing what they've earned. I didn't know what to say. My parents had always been ambitious, carefully curating their image, pretending to be the perfect couple, the perfect family. But under that polish, there had always been greed, control, and a deep, unspoken favoritism that circled around Brooke like gravity. I was always the afterthought, the helper, the one they could rely on but never celebrate. Now, for the first time, that quiet imbalance was visible to everyone. By the next day, it wasn't just talk. Brooke showed up at my apartment unannounced, makeup streaked, her voice shaking with fury. You couldn't just leave it alone, could you? She spat. You had to make yourself the victim. I took a step back, stunned by the venom in her tone. Brooke, this isn't about me. Grandma found out you used my name. I didn't even know. She snapped. Mom and Dad handled everything. And now my loan's frozen, Ethan's furious, and the wedding venue's threatening to cancel because the payment bounced. Tears welled in her eyes, but there was no remorse, only rage. You always ruin everything, Claire. You're just jealous because someone finally noticed me for once. She stormed out before I could say another word, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I stood there for a long time, the silence ringing in my ears. That night, Grandma called again. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. "No," I admitted, my voice breaking. "Everything's falling apart." She paused for a long moment. "Sometimes things have to fall apart before they can be rebuilt properly," she said. "This family has been rotting for years, dear. It just took a little truth to break the surface." I thought the damage had peaked, but the following weekend, at a family meeting Grandma insisted on hosting, I realized her plan wasn't just about justice. It was about forcing every one of us to face what we'd become. The following weekend, Grandma Eleanor called for a family meeting at her lake house. She said it as if it were an invitation, but everyone knew it wasn't optional. I arrived early, the soft hum of the water outside contrasting sharply with the storm I could feel brewing inside. By the time my parents' car pulled into the driveway, tension was already thick enough to cut through. Brooke trailed behind them, sunglasses hiding her red, puffy eyes, while my father looked like he hadn't slept in days. My mother didn't even greet me when she walked in. She brushed past, muttering something under her breath about humiliation. Grandma waited for everyone to sit before she began. "I assume you've all read the bank's notice by now," she said evenly. "Good. Then we can have an honest conversation." My father slammed his hand on the table. "This has gone far enough, Mother. You've embarrassed this family publicly. Do you have any idea what that's done to my business?" "Yes," she said calmly. "I do. I also know what it's done to your daughter's reputation after you dragged her into a loan she didn't sign for." My mother scoffed. "Oh, please. You act like it's some criminal conspiracy. Families help each other." "Families don't steal from each other," Grandma replied sharply. "You used Claire's credit, risked her name, and lied about it. You would have let her take the fall if things went wrong. That's not help, Vivian, that's exploitation." For once, my father didn't defend her. He just stared at the floor, jaw clenched. Brooke finally broke the silence. "You could have talked to us first," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to go to the bank." Grandma turned to her with a rare gentleness. "I tried, Brooke. Many times. You just didn't listen. You were too busy letting your parents hand you everything." Brooke looked away, her lip quivering. The weight of truth was finally cracking her pride. My mother leaned forward, her voice brittle. "So, what now, Mother? You get to play judge and jury while we all sit here like criminals?" Grandma folded her hands. "No," she said quietly. "You get to choose what happens next." She reached into a folder and placed 2 envelopes on the table. "The first one," she said, tapping it lightly, "is a written confession, everything you did with Claire's name. If you sign it, the bank will drop their fraud claim in exchange for restitution. The second," she slid the thinner envelope toward me, "contains the deed to your new house, Claire. No strings attached." My mother's face twisted with fury. "You're rewarding her for betraying her family." Grandma's eyes hardened. "No, Vivian. I'm rewarding her for being the only one in this room who hasn't forgotten what integrity means." The silence that followed was suffocating. I sat frozen, torn between disbelief and heartbreak. Brooke finally whispered, "You're destroying us, Grandma." Eleanor looked at her sadly. "No, my dear. I'm saving what little is left to save." I thought that was the end of it, but as my mother reached for the confession envelope, her trembling hands told me something I didn't yet know. She wasn't planning to sign it. She was planning revenge. The days after that meeting felt strangely quiet, like the calm before another storm. Grandma believed it was over, that the signed confession and restitution would put things right, but deep down I knew my mother too well. Silence, in her world, never meant peace, it meant plotting. A week passed without a single message from her, no calls, no confrontation. Then one morning, my phone buzzed with an email notification from my company's HR department, urgent, internal review notice. My heart skipped. I opened it and felt my blood drain. Someone had anonymously sent copies of my bank statements, claiming I'd received illegal financial assistance tied to a fraudulent property purchase. My mother's words from that dinner replayed in my head, "You have no idea what you've done." I knew instantly it was her. Within an hour, I was sitting in a glass office under the cold fluorescent lights of HR, trying to explain why my grandmother had legally gifted me a house while my parents were under investigation for fraud. The HR manager was polite, but his eyes said everything. My spotless record now carried a stain I hadn't created. I drove straight to Grandma's afterward, my pulse racing. She opened the door before I even knocked. "She's retaliating, isn't she?" Grandma said quietly. I nodded. "She reported me to my company. She's trying to make me look like I'm part of this." Grandma's eyes darkened. Vivian never learned the difference between pride and cruelty. She turned, motioning for me to follow. "Come with me." We went into her study, where she pulled out a locked drawer and removed a small wooden box. Inside were letters, old photographs, and one neatly folded legal document. "If she wants to play dirty," Grandma said, "then it's time you saw the truth about where she came from." I frowned. "What is this?" She handed me a faded letter, written in my mother's handwriting. It was dated nearly 30 years ago, long before I was born. It was a plea for money. A desperate letter my mother had written to Grandma, begging for a loan to cover my father's debts after one of his failed investments. Attached was a promissory note and signed, "Unpaid." "She's been taking from me for decades," Grandma said, her voice cold. "Every time she cried poverty, I helped. And every time, she lied about paying me back." I swallowed hard, realizing this wasn't just about a house, it was years of hidden manipulation, resentment, and control boiling over. "She'll never stop, Grandma," I whispered. "She doesn't know how." "No," Grandma said softly, "but you do." She reached into the box again and handed me a flash drive. "This has every financial record I've ever kept, every transfer, every receipt, every lie they told. If she wants a war, you give her the truth." I stared at the small drive in my hand, realizing that for the first time, I wasn't the one being protected. I was being armed. I didn't know it then, but the next move I made with that flash drive would not only end my parents' schemes, it would change how everyone in town saw the Hale family forever. 2 days later, I walked into my company's HR office again, this time with the flash drive clutched in my hand like a weapon. My mother had wanted to destroy my credibility. Instead, she had handed me the perfect stage. I handed the drive to the compliance director, explaining that it contained years of financial manipulation and evidence connecting my parents to the same fraudulent acts they'd accused me of. As he scanned the files, his expression shifted from suspicion to stunned disbelief. This clears you entirely," he said. "And it implicates them?" I nodded. "Every cent, every signature, it's all there." He thanked me quietly and promised to forward everything to the legal department. As I left the building, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. I wasn't vindictive by nature, but I was tired of being the one they blamed to protect their lies. That night, Adrian from our legal team called to say the evidence had been forwarded to state investigators. You'll probably see some fallout in the press, he warned gently. He was right. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Prominent couple under fraud investigation after daughter provides evidence. Photos of my parents leaving their home with tight faces and forced smiles spread like wildfire. My phone filled with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, each one some variation of I had no idea. But the worst part wasn't the headlines, it was Brooke. She showed up at my door, mascara smeared, shaking with fury. How could you do this to them? She demanded. Their mom and dad. And they tried to destroy me, I said quietly. They forged my name, Brooke. They turned me into a criminal to save themselves. They were desperate. She shot back. You've just ruined our entire family. Her voice cracked, tears spilling down her face. I softened for a second, seeing the terrified little sister beneath the anger. No, Brooke, I said gently. They ruined it the moment they chose lies over love. She stared at me, eyes wide, then turned and ran. I watched her go, knowing I might never see her again. That night, Grandma called. It's done, she said simply. The investigation's official. Your parents will have to answer for what they did. I wanted to feel victorious, but all I felt was hollow. It's over, I whispered. No, dear, she replied softly. It's only over when you decide what kind of person you'll be after this. I looked out the window, the glow of the streetlights casting long shadows across the floor. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by their choices. I was free, but freedom, I realized, could feel as heavy as guilt. And just when I thought I'd finally escaped the wreckage of my family's lies, one unexpected visitor showed up at my door, with a truth that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about Grandma's plan. It was late evening when the knock came, soft but deliberate, echoing through my apartment like a ghost from the past. I hesitated before opening the door, half expecting Brooke or a reporter. But it wasn't either, it was Ethan, Brooke's fiancé. He stood there looking uneasy, clutching a brown envelope. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I nodded, still on guard. He stepped inside, eyes flicking around nervously before settling on me. I didn't know who else to bring this to, he said, holding out the envelope. Brooke found it in your grandmother's study before she left town. My pulse quickened. What is it? Just read it, he said. Inside were several handwritten pages, yellowed with age. The first line made my breath hitch. It was a letter from Grandma Eleanor addressed to me. My dear Claire, if you're reading this, it means the truth has found you before I could tell it myself. My eyes darted across the page. You've always been my quiet strength, the one who never asked for anything. But you need to understand, what I didn't do only to protect you. I did it because I saw what this family was becoming. I turned the page, my heart pounding. Vivian wasn't always this way. When she was young, she was brilliant, kind, full of promise. But life with your father hardened her. The first lie she ever told wasn't about money, it was about love. And I let it happen because I thought she'd find her way back. My hands shook as I read on. The house, the accounts, even the trust, they were all part of something I built years ago, meant for both my daughters and their children. But when I saw how they twisted it, I changed the terms. You were never meant to inherit everything, Claire. You were meant to inherit the truth. My throat tightened. I looked up at Ethan, who watched me silently. There's more, he said softly. I flipped to the final page. By the time you read this, the fallout will have begun. It will hurt, but remember this, What I gave you was not a house or a title. It was the power to end a cycle that has broken us for generations. Do not become them. Use what's yours to build something honest. Something lasting. I folded the letter with trembling hands, tears stinging my eyes. Why did Brooke give this to you? I asked. Ethan hesitated. Because she didn't trust herself to give it to you. She's angry, but deep down, she knows your grandmother was right. She wanted you to have it. I sank onto the couch, the letter resting on my lap like a confession from another lifetime. She's gone, isn't she? Ethan nodded. She passed away this morning. Heart failure. Peacefully, they said. The room spun for a moment, the sound of my heartbeat drowning out everything else. My grandmother's plan had ended exactly as she wanted, but at a cost none of us were ready to pay. The next morning, I stood in front of Grandma's lake house with her letter in my hand, ready to fulfill the one final promise she'd left unfinished, a promise that would decide whether the Hale legacy lived in truth or died in shame. The lake was still that morning, the surface glassy and perfect, reflecting the gray sky above like a mirror that refused to break. I stood at the edge of the old dock behind Grandma Eleanor's house, the letter clutched tightly in my hand, the chill wind brushing against my face. The house itself looked smaller now, emptier without her presence, yet somehow alive with everything she'd left behind: truth, defiance, love disguised as discipline. I'd come to say goodbye, but also to decide what came next. Inside, her lawyer was waiting by the kitchen table, papers spread out neatly beside a mug of untouched tea. Claire, he said softly when I entered, your grandmother left instructions. Specific ones. I nodded, still unable to speak. He handed me a sealed envelope labeled for Claire alone. Inside was a single page and a set of keys, the deed to the lake house. Do not sell this place, her letter said. Make it a refuge. For the broken, the forgotten, the ones who lost faith in family but still believe in second chances. That is how you rebuild what they tried to destroy. My throat tightened as I read. It wasn't just property, it was purpose. Grandma hadn't left me wealth, she'd left me work. Outside, I heard footsteps on the gravel. When I turned, Brooke was there, her eyes red but her expression softer than I'd seen in years. She hesitated at the doorway. I heard about the house, she said quietly. It's yours now. I looked down at the letter in my hand. No, I said slowly. It's ours, if we want it to be. She frowned, confused. After everything, you'd still want that? Grandma wanted to end the fighting, I said. She wanted us to stop inheriting the worst parts of them. Brooke's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I can. Then start small, I said. Just help me turn this place into something good. She nodded weakly, wiping her cheeks. Maybe I can try. For the first time in years, there was no anger between us, just two sisters standing in the ruins of a family, trying to build something honest from the ashes. Later, as she left, I walked down to the dock again, the keys cold in my palm. The sun broke through the clouds, scattering gold across the lake, and I could almost hear Grandma's voice in the wind, calm, resolute, forgiving. She'd always known the truth, that family isn't about shared blood or shared blame. It's about who chooses to stay when everything else has fallen apart. I looked up at the sky, whispered thank you, and finally let the past drift away with the ripples on the water. I didn't inherit her money, I inherited her strength. And as I stood there, watching the light return to the lake, I realized that was worth more than anything a will could ever give. For restitution. The second, she slid the thinner envelope toward me, contains the deed to your new house, Claire. No strings attached. My mother's face twisted with fury. You're rewarding her for betraying her family. Grandma's eyes hardened. No, Vivian. I'm rewarding her for being the only one in this room who hasn't forgotten what integrity means. The silence that followed was suffocating. I sat frozen, torn between disbelief and heartbreak. Brooke finally whispered, "You're destroying us, Grandma." Eleanor looked at her sadly. No, my dear. I'm saving what little is left to save. I thought that was the end of it, but as my mother reached for the confession envelope, her trembling hands told me something I didn't yet know. She wasn't planning to sign it. She was planning revenge. The days after that meeting felt strangely quiet, like the calm before another storm. Grandma believed it was over, that the signed confession and restitution would put things right, but deep down I knew my mother too well. Silence, in her world, never meant peace, it meant plotting. A week passed without a single message from her, no calls, no confrontation. Then one morning, my phone buzzed with an email notification from my company's HR department, urgent, internal review notice. My heart skipped. I opened it and felt my blood drain. Someone had anonymously sent copies of my bank statements, claiming I'd received illegal financial assistance tied to a fraudulent property purchase. My mother's words from that dinner replayed in my head, "You have no idea what you've done." I knew instantly it was her. Within an hour, I was sitting in a glass office under the cold fluorescent lights of HR, trying to explain why my grandmother had legally gifted me a house while my parents were under investigation for fraud. The HR manager was polite, but his eyes said everything. My spotless record now carried a stain I hadn't created. I drove straight to Grandma's afterward, my pulse racing. She opened the door